Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you again, and welcome back to my channel. So, yeah, we have spent a few sessions talking about the basic concept, data process, V model. I think it'll be more interesting to move on to the big topic in the framework. So today, I'm going to talk about business object. Hope you like it. Okay, so let's start the topic this week, which is on the OUF framework for business object basics. We will touch four topics today, and first one is the business object against maintenance object. Second one is around business object messaging. So how does application server and database server talk to each other? The third one is the business object configuration. What are the aspects can be configured for your project purpose? And number four is where you can find help um, in terms of business objects and the related topic. Okay, so I think a few weeks ago I was talking about the relationship between business object and maintenance object is more like abstract class and the one implement abstract class. I still think that is a accurate presentation for these two system objects. But today we look a bit more into details, what they are, and what is the limit of them as well. So for a maintenance object, you are able to represent the business information with a collection of tables. So when you look at the maintenance object, you can see the primary table and also all the subtables collectively representing one maintenance object. Um, and second, what it can do is specify permissible options, for example, batch control and also the archiving settings, for example. So this is another aspect of maintenance object where you can define options, but they are not necessarily the one being used. They are more like uh, these these list of options. They are available for the business object to be used. And what it cannot do, um, it cannot be configured and present the business logic behind an MO. Now, that's not 100% true, but it's also true. So you can define, let's say, um, the rules, for example, the auditing. So when we define auditing for the maintenance object, if let's say if person record has changed, then you want to send an update to external system for synchronization, let's say. Um, that is that can be done via the maintenance object algorithm. However, it's not. It's more like it's more on the physical side where you, let's say the data has changed. Yeah, we can reflect it, but it's not in a business logic sense where you can define a business object more um, easily and with more flexibility as well. Now, The second part I was gonna talk about is what can the business object do, but the maintenance object cannot do. Okay, so for the business object, it actually provides the tools for user to configure. For example, the schema um, and all the fields level information to the database tables. So in maintenance object, we can only map um, physically table to table, metadata table to database table, field level um, metadata field to database table field. But actually, you cannot define a business attribute, business entity, and business element into the database directly. With business object schema, you can do that. And secondly, it supports the business object level configuration on additional validation and business rules. As I said earlier, you can define these rules in maintenance object, but when you define maintenance object, it's more of a generic physical record validation without involving business rules. If you define business rules, you normally will define that on the business object level. And also, it provides configuration for the UI. So there are two ways of configuring the UI in the framework. One, you can use UI map. I think that is very common one since a few years ago. But UI map give you a lot of flexibility. For example, if you know Java code, you can do a lot of dependent fields on the dynamic HTML. However, if you have a very generic UI, you just want to list all the fields and you just want to make the fields to be editable based on its type. There's no dependency on the screen between different fields, different sections. There is another way which you can use UI hint. So UI hint is a way that you can configure your business object schema and include and write the schema in a certain way so that when the system read the BO, it understands how it should be rendered on the screen. We'll talk about this option in the future videos, but that is something really cool because it's actually significantly reduce your efforts in terms of implementation compared with UI map. And next one is about export and facilitate the custom lifecycle configuration with state level business rule add-on. So I can say in maintenance object there is no easy way to define lifecycle. You can still define lifecycle, but the way to define lifecycle is through coding. So I think a lot of people has been looking at things like user exit class, but you have to write Java code for it. There is no way you can configure it easily. I mean, for business user, they cannot easily understand it as well. So without using business object, it is quite difficult to explain what's happening. And this is probably something you're already seeing with the CCMB object. If you want to know what happens when let's say a bill is completed, you have to know where exactly this rule can be plugged in. It might be on the SA type, it might be on the customer class. You have to know exactly where you go. However, for the business object lifecycle, at each stage, what exactly is happening, you can just simply go to your business object and look at the configuration in place. And if that's configured correctly, it's quite intuitive to understand. Now let's do a quick comparison between the business object and maintenance object. So for maintenance object, it's abstract and generic. For business object, it's represent the business entity. Remember, for one maintenance object, you can have many business object, and um, that is actually very important feature in the system, because let's say you have for a person at maintenance object, you could have multiple BO. One is for the customer, one for the broker, and one for business entity. You can have different subtypes defined for a generic type. And as we said, maintenance object represent table and fields, but business object, in the business sense, it defines object and element, which is to mapping the business entities to a physical entity. And then the maintenance object has fundamental rules, where business object has add-on business rules. Well, the reason I'm talking about add-on business rules is in the future, we will talk about the order of execution, how the rules are executed if you are invoke a business object. It doesn't mean the maintenance object rule are ignored, but there is an order of it. And from there, we can actually see why we are saying the business object is add-on in terms of the algorithms. Okay, next one is maintenance object have limited support for customization, and the business object has tools provided, as we just discussed. The last bit about the lifecycle, maintenance object has change handler, and business object, you can configure a lifecycle with algorithms at different system events, so you can understand what is happening very easily from one place. Okay, just finish part one. We'll go to second part, which is the business object messaging. Let's try to illustrate this with a diagram. So I take one example where you write a script and you say, in the script, I want to invoke BO and I want to add a BO, add a record for this BO. So what actually happens is, when the script is running on the application layer, it maps the business object XML to the maintenance object XML first. Actually, there's one point I want to mention. I don't know if everyone has been navigating through this business object and maintenance object. There is a link on both business object and maintenance object for the XML. If you're interested, you can look at the XML and find out the difference between them. And once it's mapped, at the same time, actually, the business rule is executed in a certain order, which we will talk about that later. And then it submits the XML of the maintenance object based on the collection of table and fields to the database. By that time, database receive this call and record is created, and actually it feeds back the XML back to the application server, and it's actually the way around now. The maintenance object XML map back to business object XML and reflect the results. Now, I think a lot of people is trying to run this XAI inbound service, and by XAI submission, or if you use the tool, for example, the SOAP UI. And one thing you found is when you submit a record, it actually comes back with a very similar XML, and sometimes you find the technical ID being created. This works exactly in this way, and you can try to follow this path, and now you can understand why the ID is coming back. Now, some of the record I know you don't have the ID back. Think about why. It's not actually it's because it didn't bring it back. It's probably because the ID is not part of the XML. So look for that, and you can do a check as well. Now, next one, I am listing all the tables here. I think in the last video, I talk about two concepts. For me, they are always very important to go together. One is data and one is process. If you imagine the business object, maintenance object on the metadata layer is the process which read, write, update the data in the database, then we also need to know what is the data to represent the metadata in this case. And I think it's the first time I'm starting to talk about the database tables. So I will do a quick introduction of what different types of tables you will actually see, or what pattern you might see in the future as well. So for each of the maintenance objects, you will have a primary table, and all the rest of the table is the subtable. Very likely you will have a language table. For example, here you can have a business object language table, and that's not just for these two maintenance objects. It is happening for, I would say, probably most of them, because it need to support the localization for the application. And also you will see, for example, you see the difference between maintenance object and business object. In business object, you have a schema. So immediately you actually see the business object provide a schema for you to configure, where maintenance object doesn't. It just physically mapping to the tables. And also the difference is the status. You see there's three tables: algorithm, language, and option. Because business object has status and maintenance object doesn't. Similarly, for the transition rule, that is a part of the status, is transition between the status. Yeah, there are other tables which I'm not going to expand more, but if you're interested, go to your maintenance object, have a look at these two, and you know a bit more about what happens at the backend. Okay, so number 3, we will talk about the business object configuration, what you can do and what you can find on the business object if you are already working with a system in production. Okay, so I have made a word myself. I made a word called also. Actually, that's just the four different aspects of the business object. So the first is the business object algorithm. For example, you define information string for the business objects, validation rules, pre-post processing, audit, these different type of rules. The second, in the life cycle, you can define status, transition rules between the status, algorithms running in the status, which we will see later. It happens at monitor, enter, exit, different system events, and also the monitor process on the lifecycle status, which is batch driven. And then you have schema, which you can define the schema, map the fields, map the business elements into the table fields with help of validation, formatting, defaults, and also, as we just said, the physical mappings. The last bit is the options on business objects, where you define the maintenance or display UI map, whether you want to temporarily inactivate a BO algorithm. One more thing I didn't mention about is this application service. You will see that on the business object as well for security setting. Okay, so last bit, help. Where can you find help? First one is in the system there is a help button, and I don't know you have seen that before. And this is the first place I will go. Because if you are using the help, it's actually have anchor links, which means if you are on a business object page, you click the help, it will show you all the information about business object. If you are on a service agreement page, you click the link, it will show you exactly about service agreement. And the second thing is the dashboard tips. So when you are navigating through the system, if you are on business object or script, these two objects, they have tips on the right hand side in the dashboard. Now there are quite a lot of information, very useful. I mean they are actually a part of the help as well, but they are very direct support in the specific topic, and especially these two require some technical support as well. So that's the place I will go and have a look. Otherwise, you can go to the website. The article has a documentation site, and you can look for the online documentation. I think it's actually quite similar to the help, but it will have more, for example, search and find support. And yeah, and they will have updated documentation if the functionality has changed, for example, with different versions. I mean, yeah. The last one is obvious one, right? So you can ask me. So we have a WhatsApp community, and the link is on the channel. If you like to join, please do. Okay, so that's the last part of this topic, and I think I've tried to talk through the very basics of business object, and I think we will be dive into business object because this is essentially a key part of um, business rules, presentation of how things are working, and if you know business object well, you will very quickly master how to navigate and then figure out what are the things happening at the back end as well. So hope you like this video, and if you do, please click like button and subscribe. Share to your friends if you think that that's helpful for them. Um, and I see you next time. Bye.